Welcome to Rahau Academy on Air. This podcast is a way for us to present non-technical information related to Rahau in a Q&A format with industry experts. I'm Max Rohr, the Rahau Academy Manager for North America.
My guest today is Dane Hansen. Dane is a Senior Vice President of Government Relations for IAPMO in Washington, D.C. He has an extensive background in the public policy world, specializing in the lobbying effort for energy and water causes, nationally but also globally. Welcome, Dane.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to discuss these issues.
So you have a great background, and I wanted to ask you some questions about how the listeners of this podcast can get a little bit more involved, and then if you could go through some of the details of how the policy works. So to start with, outside of being a lobbyist for IAPMO, what other political positions have you held in the past?
Great question. So prior to coming to IAPMO and opening their Washington office, this was actually a very unique opportunity because prior to me joining IAPMO, the organization had no official or stable government affairs presence here because a lot of the issues that historically IAPMO dealt with were on the state and local level. So they had a great representation on the state level with field reps and field services. And then as the scope and the breadth and the size of IAPMO developed and grew over the years to a large international organization that it is today, it became very apparent that the issues that they're facing are going to be impacted much more by federal regulations and international trade restrictions and deals. So prior to that, joining this organization, I was with the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, or NEMA. They represent some of the nation's largest electrical manufacturers, from Siemens, GE, to Philips, and we did largely, again, environmental policy and energy policy for the U.S., and I oversaw that portfolio for them doing their government affairs work and outreach to Capitol Hill and federal agencies. Prior to that, I worked on several congressional campaigns for various people running for office, and also worked on Capitol Hill. I was a senior policy advisor to several members of Congress, advising them on federal budgets, appropriations levels for federal agencies as it relates to EPA, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and the energy component of those agencies and how they're used. So that's kind of a snapshot on the high level without going into too much detail.
Sure, and I think that we had talked when I was in D.C. last year when we had I think it was the High Performance Building Week, that you've kind of seen the sausage being made from a bunch of different perspectives, and that really from a lobbyist side, you have the ability to really work on the legislation and put together what an ideal policy would be and not necessarily have to worry about just getting reelected or, devote more of your time to that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, different take on the situation and, something I had never really thought of before.
You nailed it. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, it's a unique position because as a staff member on Capitol Hill, where you're crafting the legislation with the members of Congress and trying to get their priorities, you're trying to craft good national policy, but you always have to represent the senator or congressman's elected base, his constituents. And so with that in mind, sometimes if it's a very Republican-leaning or maybe a Democrat-leaning district, that's going to affect the policies and stuff and overall legislation that you'll craft. And so being able to work on it from the private sector, we're able to develop policies and propose laws that will benefit the industry as a whole, and then go to the Hill and say, okay, this isn't what we want. What members of Congress sit on the relevant committees, relevant jurisdictions that we need to get this impacted? And so instead of having to tailor the message to a specific member, we're tailoring to the industry and then the overall climate on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I think that just seems like a more natural flow of the process for whatever reason that's the way that it is today. So if you were someone who wanted to get more involved in politics and you decided that whatever set of policies related to your industry weren't really helping you out or weren't driving the country in the right direction, at a local level, how would you get more involved in the political process?
So there's many things, and with the opportunity to be engaged with your trade associations, your professional societies is a great way, because many of these professional societies, trade associations, think tanks that you have an affiliation with, the vast majority of them have a government affairs presence. So they are able to assist on specific issues. And on a local level, they're able to engage very well, because if you can provide them the information where you live, the city you work in, the state you work in, they can give you quickly who are the elected officials, everything from the most local city council, county commissioner level, all the way up to your state senator, state representative, governors, all the way up to your federal officials, senators and congressmen, persons. This is a way for you to really identify the issues important to you and reach out to them. So basically attend their town halls. When they hold town halls in their districts, in their state, attend. Don't be shy about issuing letters to your elected officials. As an example, with the IATMO group, we have a portal on our website that allows you to go in and put your information in, put your zip code in, and it'll automatically populate all your elected officials, so that you can quickly and easily say exactly who represents you. But then when there's an issue important to the industry, you are quickly able to respond to that, because you're getting guidance and input from the association's priorities to be able to craft a message that deeply affects you. So definitely stay on top of the issues that are important to your business and your industry, and then engage with relevant associations and become really aware of what your representatives are doing. What I often find is talking to some businesses throughout the country is the lack of understanding of where their elected officials stand on their issues. And when you're representing, when you have a company or a business or a contracting outfit in any organization, in any region, there's an elected official who represents you. And if they're good for you or if they're not good for you, it's very important to how your businesses will play out. Are you getting the incentives you need? Are you having too many restrictions? Are you being overburdened by regulation? Those are all things that would help for you to know, are your representatives truly representing you or not?
So if you, let's say you are interested in the process for the first time, you identify, let's say, a state senator to talk to, what's the best way to make a case for your industry or for a specific policy or something like that to that official? Is it a phone call? Is it writing a letter, sending an email? What's the best way to kind of be noticed?
I would say all of the above. And the reason why I say that is they accept channels of communication by all means. So email, letters, but to be completely frank, because a lot of times when you're sending an email in, if you don't have a specific contact that you're trying to reach, if you're sending to the general inbox, oftentimes that gets sorted out by an intern or a staff member, and it may not get filed correctly, it may not get forwarded to the correct person, and it may not get much intake. So the first thing I would say is identify the person on the staff that is going to address those issues. So if you're writing in on water issues, who is the professional member of that staff member, of that congressman, senator, state representative, whatever, that focuses on those issues? And a simple phone call to that office to say, hey, I'm interested in these issues. Who is a staff member to talk to on this? That, and you'll get their name and you can reach out to them. If you're seeking, I would always encourage, especially if you're reaching out to your elected official for the first time, is to try to attempt to reach them specifically. Elected officials, doesn't matter if they're at the local level or the federal level, they want to meet with their constituents. If you're a voter, if you're in their district, in their state, they want to meet. And if you can come in and schedule an appointment when you're in Washington, D.C., or when you're in the state capital of your state, they will meet with you. If they're in town and their schedules allow, they will meet with constituents. And oftentimes people don't realize that. They think, oh, they're a senator or a congressman, and they'll never have the opportunity to speak with me. That's not true. They oftentimes make specific time set aside for constituent meetings. So if that happens, make sure you reach out to them. Make sure if you have the opportunity to send them a letter, I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. or Sacramento or any state capital, and I want to meet with you. And really bring up the issues that you're facing. So first, try to get a meeting with them. Second, try to get a staff member who covers those issues. And third, continue to follow up and send emails and letters when you have those kind of open communication channels.
And I thought that was interesting. You mentioned that once before, that getting a meeting with the chief of staff for your senator may be an even better meeting, depending on the case, that they may be the person who actually will summarize that and then have a quick conversation with the senator and say, you know what, we really need to pay attention to water issues and ABC, here's why. That, that's not a throwaway meeting if you get a sit down with the chief of staff or someone other than the politician themselves, I guess.
It's a very good point. And like I mentioned a moment ago, is getting that channel of communication with a staff member, because an elected official, like I mentioned, doesn't matter if it's a state senator or a federal senator or a congressman or a representative or assemblyman, they are incredibly busy people. They have to deal with, when you're an elected official, you're dealing with issues from national security to drought to healthcare to immigration and 100 other issues in between. And they could be very small issues, they could be very large issues. And so to come in and say, we're going to talk about a hydronic system, that's a very niche area. And the congressman who's trying to drink out of a fire hose on a daily battle is not going to have the bandwidth to fully grasp everything that you're going to say. So meeting with them is nice, getting the picture is nice, letting them know about you is a very valuable thing. But the day-to-day work on drafting the legislation or suggesting changes to bills or amendments, that's going to be done by the staff member. And so if you are able to sit down and build that relationship there, or if you try to set up a meeting with an elected official and for whatever reason they're traveling or they're in a hearing and they can't meet, meeting with a staff member who oversees that issue day in and day out, they're the experts of that. They'll know, does it have a chance of passing or not? Are you going to waste your time or not? And being on the other side of that, where I was often meeting with people when they couldn't meet with the congressman or senator, I was the one working day in and day out on the very specific issues. When it came to issues under my portfolio in the environment, your job is to know those issues. Your job is to know what regulations are happening that are going to impact any potential constituents, how it will affect them as subsequent legislation needed to fix that. And so, without question, I mean, meeting with the relevant staff member can be very valuable.
Great. So if you do have a meeting on the schedule with either the senator or someone on their staff, what advice would you give someone as far as kind of a way to conduct themselves for the meeting? What should you bring? What shouldn't you bring? What's the best way to get the point across?
So there's a few things. Whenever we bring people into Washington, D.C. to go and do meetings on the Hill or even at the regulatory agencies, is we greatly encourage them to put it into very basic terms, because you may be coming in to talk about some complex engineering issues or things that you're running into at a local level that could be very much in the weeds. And when you're talking to a non-industry person on Capitol Hill, or when you're talking to a non-engineer, they might not understand that. So putting it in a way that they can understand, making it simple, just like you would if you're talking to someone outside the industry. Second is to bring in that personal tie. If you're a constituent, make sure that they know that. If you have a business and you're employing constituents, make sure they know that. I'm a small business owner in your district or your state. Make sure they know that. That immediately creates a connection there, because when they have 1,000 people show up to their offices throughout the weeks, of those, there's only a small majority that are truly their voting base. So that's where you want to make sure that ties there. And secondly, the worst thing I think could happen is when people come up and they have a 200-page report that they deliver and say, okay, this information is important, and here it is. Well, when you're meeting with 20, 30 people a day at least, and they all have a lot of information, giving them something that will take them 2 months to read will never happen. So making it very concise. So if you're talking about the investment tax credit, instead of breaking out the entire tax code and the specific technologies in your business that would benefit from the investment tax credit, break it onto one page. One page, just say this is what we support and why, and outline in that page, this is the statistics. If we do this, we will be able to hire 5 more people or 10 more people, and if we do this, it'll affect us. So keeping it simple, keeping it short, and creating that personal tie.
So specifically for right now, what are some of the changes seen in the new administration on the general construction industry?
So it's actually been a very unique time, to say the least, in Washington, D.C. It's been a very unpredictable time, as we're seeing, simply because, and it's really a very unique time as well, because the rate at which confirmations are happening by the Senate, and this is when the senior leadership of these federal agencies, so the secretaries or administrators or under administrators or under secretaries, acting administrators, things like that, they're all must be confirmed by the Senate. And there's an enormous backlog right now in Congress on getting these people through for one reason or another. And so what that caused is a big logjam. Regulations can't be pushed out as quickly as they normally would because they don't have the staff there to approve them. They have the career staff doing their hard work to get it done, but if you don't have the people to head it up and approve it, it becomes difficult. So we're seeing some things are slowing down because the regulations can't happen as quickly. Under President Trump, what we are seeing is a great effort to reduce regulation. So regardless of where we are on the political spectrum, we have to be very careful in knowing that he issued an executive order where if you create one regulation, you must take two off the books of the government. So one in, two out. This is, I think, for small business owners who are maybe overburdened with regulation is a welcome sign. But I also think that we need to be careful as well, because anytime a regulation is created, it must receive approvals through many, many, many channels. It must have justifications for the economic case for it, the impact, the environmental impact, all the impacts for a regulation, all the legal requirements that they have to do to create a new regulation are done. And now when they do one, they are also having to remove two. So then they have to do the justifications on two others. So in short, in order to create one new regulation, you're in essence almost doing three, because you're now having to find two others and go through the justification channels to remove them. And if you remove those, what will be the impact of that? Will it make people less safe? Will it be burdensome? Will it create more problems in the work? So it's not as simple as just create new one regulation and be done. Well, now you have to find two more and justify both of those to remove them. So we're also seeing a big change in the administration's priorities. So they're trying to push a lot of the power back to the states. So we're seeing an effort to decrease the size of the federal workforce. And also what goes along with that is some of the financial incentives. So some of the state grants and revolving funds and government-backed loans that many of the states have used for many years have been proposed for elimination or decreased. And so on one hand, small businesses like the fact that it's going back into the states and more local authority. On the other hand, sometimes they may not have the resources or the ability if the federal government is no longer giving them that kind of money to provide these programs. So we're in definitely a new world in terms of the way the policies are being created. But what we're seeing is that it's been very clear by the administration that they want to see small businesses thrive. They want to decrease regulations to do so. They want to do all they can to encourage innovation and incentives for companies in the U.S. So we're seeing, and there seems to be a lot of support for that. But as we know, outside of executive orders that the president can issue unilaterally, everything else, so proposed cuts, staff eliminations, things like that, a lot of that has to be done through Congress. So that means Congress has to approve it. So he's proposing a lot of things, but as we saw with the healthcare bill not able to pass the House, there's still a lot of checks and balances that need to happen before these will come to fruition.
Sure. And one of the things that I'm interested in hearing from you too is there a specific favorite energy efficiency legislation success story that you have, and maybe it's a program or something that you've worked on in the past that really did a great job of moving the needle for either energy efficiency or water causes, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's several great ones that has been a great honor to be a part of. I mean, one that we did specifically with a lot of help from the RPA and the RPA Public Policy Committee and the great members there was we all knew that the investment tax credit was going to expire a while ago. And we did a Congressional Hill Day, we did a lobby day, we had roundtables, we were on the Hill, and really made the case for an extension of the investment tax credit to make it sure it involved the technologies from our industry rather than just focusing on solar. So solar is very important, but with the revised extension of the tax credit, it was just going to focus on a very small segment of the renewable industry and not the larger. And so we were able to go in and really work on that and try to make a positive change and say, okay, when it comes to the extension of the tax credit, let's look at solar thermal. Let's look at other technologies that greatly affect the hydronic industry and the plumbing industry in general. And so fortunately, we were able to get that extended. We were able to get it to incorporate solar thermal, which was a big win for the industry, a big win for the manufacturers, and it was a good win for the general public and just the ability to create incentives for the manufacturers, knowing that it's not going to last forever. It was very clear in those meetings that elected officials were saying that incentives are meant to be an incubator to grow technologies and not to be sustaining in perpetuity. So they know that it's not going to be extended again. It's unless something crazy happens after 2021, 2020 timeframe, they're saying this is it. The industry needs to be able to know it's ending. So they was able to give them a little bit more time to get a very growing industry out there. So that was one. I mean, we did a lot of great work on incentives on the state level. I mean, we've worked with states on incentives, state rebates for, or tax holidays for WaterSense products, where if you want to purchase a WaterSense product, you are going to bill for a weekend a year, you go in and not pay any taxes for those products. Those have been very well received as well. And there's other small ones that we've done with, like, the energy and electricity used in some electrical products when I was at NEMA, and some of the big renewable discussions where historically at the table was just solar thermal, and now we're coming in with all these other technologies. We're coming in with the solar thermal side of it. We're coming with the hydronic side of it, and really making the case for a technology that has largely been overlooked in a lot of ways.
So if you had the task of reducing the amount of energy we use as a country by 25% in 10 years, what would you say is the best approach? How would you do that?
There's not one way to achieve those kind of savings. A lot of industries may come in and say, hey, if we install 100% photovoltaics on roofs, we'll achieve X amount of savings. Or if we install 100% geothermal, it's going to take a combination. It's a systematic approach. Looking at one technology over another is not going to happen. We're going to have to look at a lot. I mean, and there's certain areas in the country where it's going to make perfect sense to install photovoltaics on the homes because the payback is going to become more reasonable in certain areas because of the intensity of the sun, and they can create enough energy and potentially sell some energy back to their utilities like they're doing in some regions. In some states, it's going to be much more focused on water. As we know, water in and of itself is incredibly energy intensive. So whether it be pumping it, whether it be bringing it in and treating it, whether it be heating it, all the manners of using water in our country is incredibly energy intensive. So by default, looking at the key energy-water nexus, the connection between not only water and the energy it uses, but also when you're creating energy, whether it be through turbines or whether it be through dams or whatever it is, or even nuclear, when you're using amounts of energy, how much water are you using? So looking at those together, and this is where we've really been working with Congress and the administration on trying to have them focus on this, because currently you have very siloed agencies. So you have the Department of Energy focuses on energy issues, and you have EPA focusing on environmental water issues, and you have HUD working on building issues. But in a lot of areas, these are across agencies. And so we've been trying to focus on, instead of looking at it just energy savings or just water savings or just renewable savings, let's look at it all together. How can we achieve a general savings? If our goal is to make 25%, well, in certain regions, we'll need to focus on solar thermal. Certain regions will need to focus on pure hydronic systems. Certain areas will need to focus on wind generation, or whatever it may be. But I do know one of the big hiccups that we're facing is not only the siloed approach of many of the government agencies, but also in what we're seeing an uptick is in the efficiency of batteries. So being able to store energy for longer periods of time without losing capacity. So we know through the transmission and distribution of water and electricity, there's a lot of loss along the way. So through the power lines and through the water mains, there's a lot of leaks, there's a lot of small issues, as we know, and just simply addressing the inefficiencies in our current system, not only looking at what we need to be doing, but what we already have that we're not seeing efficiencies from, we'll gain a lot. I don't know the stat offhand, but it's about 1/3, maybe 25% of water is lost from the water treatment plant to the end use simply through inefficiencies, leaks, and things like that. And it's very similar, if not higher, with electricity. When it goes to the power plant to get to the home, just through the transmission and distribution of channels, it loses a lot. So in our own inefficiencies right now, we're losing a lot. And so just by tightening up and being more smart with our infrastructure, what we already have, we're going to see a lot of gains already.
Great. Yeah, and that covers a lot of topics. But as you were saying it, I was thinking that, yeah, solar may be an easier sell to the Nevada State House than to the Maine State House or something like that. So that may be an easier meeting for one of the listeners to go to the local, to the state level or the local level to pitch an idea like that. And yeah, if we had some sort of magical battery to take whatever power we're generating and keep it and distribute it a little bit better, I'm sure that would be a win for the whole country. So I've got one last question for you. Who is your favorite teacher and why?
There's a couple. I had a high school teacher and then an undergraduate. One of my teachers in undergrad was he was actually I minored in finance, and I really think that the two teachers that I had, one of my business and then actually my political science guy in high school, and the great thing between both of these teachers were they actually did it as a second career. They were out there. One worked in city government and state government for many, many years. And after doing that for 20 or 30 years, at the age of 55 or 60, he came on and became a teacher for how many years, I don't know. But he was great. And then my finance one used to be a big banker on Wall Street and did that for a while, decided to leave that and then teach at college. And both of these people are doing it not because of the need. They already had other jobs. They're making good money. They came and did it because of the love. And I think they see that not just the love of teaching, but the love of the subject they were teaching. They were able to come in with great experience, very applicable expertise and experience from their work for many, many years, and brought that into real book work. Because sometimes in some classes, reading out of a textbook and statistics is great for your knowledge, but in actual real-world application, sometimes it's not all there. But to be able to have that can apply, this is why we're learning this, because look what happens. I've worked on these 3 business deals in real life, and this is how it impacts this, and this. So I think they have the love, the background and expertise that really brought the learning to life.
That's a good answer. I feel like that's been the case for me as well, just as you were saying that. I had a few classes in college, and the professors weren't career academics. They had actually been in those fields, and I feel like at a minimum they just had more credibility about the topics because they had lived it. So yeah, I think that's helpful anywhere in the world of teaching. If someone's actually turned whatever wrench that the industry has to offer, that's always a big help.
Definitely.
So I wanted to thank you for joining me today, Dane.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I can do it, and this has been a great opportunity. It's a very important industry, very critical to the growth of the industry is the activity on public policy. So I'm excited to be able to do this and welcome any feedback or questions that anyone may have.
Great, and thanks for the tips. So you can sign up for weekly IAPMO action alerts on their government relations page. This is a newsletter that's organized by Dane that gives you an excellent overview of what energy and water issues and legislation are being actively discussed at the federal, state, and local levels of the legislature. It's a great tool to help you stay up on the issues and get more involved with energy and water world related things. You can also sign up to actively be part of a committee, and there are a bunch of different committees in different parts of the industry, so some may be a better fit than others. But you can contact Dane directly if you're interested in getting involved. His email is Dane, D-A-I-N, Hansen, H-A-N-S-E-N, at iapmo.org. And he can help you find a committee that would be right up your alley. So thanks again, Dane, and we're excited to have a little bit better plan of action to meet with our legislatures.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dane.
To find RAHOW technical training, go to na.rahow.com/academy and check out RAHOW America's YouTube channel. Our Twitter handle is @RAHOW, and you can always ask your sales rep for more information about local trainings.